All right, so get this. Today we're going deep, really deep into the Kybalion. This book, it claims to reveal the secrets of Hermetic philosophy, which goes way back to ancient Egypt.
Oh yeah, the Kybalion, it's got this mysterious vibe.
It really does.
Published back in 1908.
Wow, that's old.
And by these anonymous authors, they call themselves three initiates, and it really leans into this whole thing about secret wisdom passed down for centuries.
And it gets even more interesting when you think about who this book is dedicated to, right? Hermes Trismegistus.
Oh yeah.
This guy, he's wrapped in myth and legend.
Totally.
The ancient Egyptians, they called him the Great Great and gave him credit for crazy knowledge.
Oh yeah, from astrology.
Astrology.
To alchemy.
Alchemy, and even teaching Abraham.
That's right.
Now, was this Hermes, was he a real person, or was he a combination of a lot of wise people? It's still debated.
Yeah.
But his influence, you can't deny it, especially on Western esoteric traditions.
Absolutely. And the Kybalion claims to be a refined version of his teachings, focusing on 7 key principles. It's almost it's like they're giving you a master key.
Oh, like that.
To unlock all these universal secrets.
A master key. I love that.
Wouldn't you say?
And these principles themselves, they're so fascinating.
They are.
Mentalism.
Yeah.
Correspondence. Vibration. Polarity. Rhythm. Cause and effect. And gender. Just reading those names, it's this isn't your typical self-help book,
Definitely not. These principles, they blend philosophy, science, and mysticism.
Yeah.
In a way that hints at some seriously profound insights.
Yeah.
But before we jump ahead, let's set the stage here. The Kybalion is really into this whole secret lineage thing.
Right.
Ancient wisdom being kept safe by just a select few.
Right. We're being led in on something special.
Exactly.
And the authors, they are pretty critical of what they see as the corruption of this, pure knowledge. Right? They say that when you mix theology with philosophy, the true essence of these teachings, it got hidden, obscured from the masses. It's they're saying, okay, you look ready for the meat, not just the milk.
Exactly. They're lifting the veil, but only for those who are ready to handle these heavy truths.
Okay, so are we ready to unpack these 7 Hermetic principles?
I think so. Let's do it.
Let's start with the foundation.
Right.
Mentalism, this principle. It's basically saying the universe, it's fundamentally mental.
Right.
Everything we experience is a mental creation of what this book calls the AL, the ultimate reality, the source of everything.
Now, the AL, that's a tough one to really grasp.
It is.
Because it represents something that, we can't truly understand. It's not like a being in the traditional sense. It's more like this infinite, eternal, all-encompassing reality where everything comes from. And mentalism is suggesting that just as we make pictures and thoughts in our minds, the AL creates entire universes.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, our everyday experiences, even this physical world around us, they're essentially thought forms. Thought forms in the mind of the AL. That's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
It really makes you question what we think is real,
It does.
The Kybalion, it pushes us to really ask what's actually real and what is just projected by the mind. And this leads us to the second principle.
Okay.
Correspondence, which builds on this idea of a mentally created universe.
Correspondence, right? This is where we get that famous Hermetic saying, as above, so below.
Exactly.
The book explains that there are patterns and principles that repeat themselves across all these different levels of reality.
That's right, suggesting this deep connection between the small and the huge, the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Oh, I like that.
So understanding one level of reality can actually give us clues about another level. For example, the book says that by studying how atoms behave, we can get a better understanding of how solar systems behave.
So if we can figure out how our own minds work,
right,
could that give us hints about how the AL works?
It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
It is.
And this idea of patterns repeating across different scales, it brings us to the third principle, vibration.
Okay, vibration. This one, it feels a bit more familiar, at least on the surface.
I think so.
Modern science tells us that everything is constantly moving.
Yeah.
From atoms vibrating to energy waves moving through space. But the Kybalion, it takes it further, right?
It does.
It says that even our thoughts and emotions, they have their own unique vibrations.
And it's these differences in vibration that create all the different forms and experiences we see. The book uses this analogy of like a spinning wheel. At slow speeds, you can see the spokes, but as it spins faster and faster, it looks like a solid, still disc.
Are they saying that what we see as solid matter is just energy vibrating, but like super slow? Like if we could somehow speed up the vibration of a rock, it would dissolve into something like more ethereal.
That's the idea. And it's not so different from how we understand radio waves, you know?
Okay.
Each radio station, it broadcasts at its own frequency. And we need to tune our receiver to that specific frequency to hear the music or the news. Similarly, the Kybalion is saying that different levels of reality are like different frequencies of vibration.
So we're starting to see how these principles connect.
Yeah.
Mentalism says the universe is mental. Correspondence, it shows us that patterns repeat themselves across different levels. And vibration explains how these mental creations, how they become different forms based on their frequency. This is a pretty elegant system so far.
It's very intricate, and it gets even more complex when we add the fourth principle, polarity. The Kybalion tells us that everything has two poles, two opposite aspects.
Right, like hot and cold, love and hate, fear and courage. But here's the interesting part. The book says these opposites, they aren't real separate things. They're more like different degrees of the same thing, like two ends of a spectrum.
And if that's true, if we can understand that these seemingly opposite states are actually connected, does that mean we can actually change our mental and emotional states? Like, could we transform fear into courage or apathy into passion just by changing our vibration on that spectrum?
That's a powerful idea.
It is.
But how would we do that? Does the Kybalion give us any techniques or practices?
Well, we'll get into the practical stuff later.
Okay.
But for now, let's keep exploring the framework. The fifth principle, rhythm, it offers another layer of understanding.
Rhythm, right? The ebb and flow of life. This one's pretty relatable.
It is.
We all experience those cycles of energy and fatigue, enthusiasm, and discouragement. The book explains that everything moves in these back and forth motions, just like a pendulum swinging.
And it's not just our moods and emotions, you know. This principle of rhythm, it applies to everything. Businesses, relationships, even entire civilizations. They rise and fall in these rhythmic cycles.
But the really cool part is that the Kybalion claims that the Hermetic masters, they learned how to neutralize these swings to escape their influence. It makes you wonder, like, does true mastery mean transcending the ups and downs of life?
It's a fascinating idea, and it raises some big questions, you know, like, can we really escape these cycles? Yeah. Or is the key to learn how to ride the waves, to use the momentum of the pendulum to our advantage?
I guess that's part of what we're trying to figure out here.
Exactly.
But before we get too lost in speculation, let's move on to the sixth principle, cause and effect. This one seems pretty straightforward, Russ.
On the surface, yeah. Every action has a consequence. But the Kybalion, it goes deeper, you know? It stresses that nothing happens by chance. Every effect has a cause, and every cause has an effect. It creates this incredibly complex web of interconnected events. Even the smallest actions can have ripple effects that go way beyond what we can immediately see.
So we're not just talking about simple cause and effect here. It's more like a butterfly effect where even a tiny flap of a butterfly's wings can end up influencing a hurricane.
Exactly. The Kybalion reminds us that we're all part of this interconnected web, and our actions, even our thoughts, have consequences that ripple out into the universe. This principle really encourages us to take responsibility for our choices.
Yeah.
And be aware of the subtle connections between everything.
Okay, I'm seeing how this principle fits into the bigger picture. If the universe is mental, like mentalism says, then our thoughts and actions, they're like vibrations creating ripples in the fabric of reality.
And that brings us to the final principle, gender. Now, it's important to remember the Kybalion isn't talking about biological sex here.
Right.
It's about these fundamental creative forces that are working in the universe. These forces are described in terms of masculine and feminine principles, always interacting, attracting, repelling, to create everything we experience.
So it's like a cosmic dance of creation with these masculine and feminine principles constantly moving, making new forms and experiences. I'm curious, does the book give any examples of how this principle shows up in the world?
It does. It points to to how atoms are formed with negatively charged particles clustering around a positively charged nucleus. It's like this dance of attraction and creation, but happening on the tiniest levels of reality.
And then it scales up from there, right?
Yeah.
The same principle of gender, it's at work in the formation of stars and planets, the interactions of ecosystems, even the dynamics of human relationships.
Exactly. And what's really mind-blowing is that the Kybalion suggests this principle is also at work in mental creation, explaining things like telepathy,
Wow.
suggestion, and hypnosis.
So if we could learn to understand and harness these masculine and feminine principles in our own minds, could we tap into those more advanced mental abilities?
That's what it implies. And it leads us to some pretty profound questions, like what is the true nature of our minds? What are we capable of if we learn to consciously work with these universal principles?
This is getting deep. We've explored all 7 principles now, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Right.
What does it really mean to live in a mentally created universe? How can we use these principles to navigate life more effectively and maybe even unlock our own hidden potential?
Well, those are the questions we'll dive into next time.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we've laid out these 7 Hermetic principles from the Kybalion, but now I'm really curious, what are the implications of all this? If we really take this idea of a mentally created universe seriously, it kind of turns everything on its head, doesn't it?
It definitely challenges how we usually think about reality, that's for sure. And the Kybalion, it doesn't shy away from those paradoxes. On the one hand, it emphasizes, how the material world is kind of an illusion.
Okay.
Saying that ultimately only the AL is truly real. But then on the other hand, it acknowledges that the universe, being a mental creation of the AL, it has its own kind of reality.
So it's not saying that the physical world is an illusion in the sense that it doesn't exist, right? It's more like its ultimate nature is different from what we normally see. It's like maybe we're so focused on the individual trees that we've completely missed the forest.
That's a great way to put it. We get so caught up in the details of our daily lives, we forget there's this much bigger, more fundamental reality behind everything. It's like the difference between looking at a beautiful tapestry up close, admiring the individual threads and colors, versus stepping back and seeing the whole picture, the intricate design those threads make.
And the Kybalion is saying that the whole tapestry of the universe, everything we see and experience, it all starts in the mind of the AL. Yeah. It's a pretty awe-inspiring concept when you really think about it.
It is.
It kind of reminds me of that idea from quantum physics where observing something actually influences how particles behave. It's like maybe our consciousness is involved in shaping the reality we experience.
That connection between consciousness and reality, that's a key theme throughout the Kybalion. And it leads us to this concept of involution and evolution, which the book touches on.
Okay, involution and evolution, this is where things started getting a little abstract for me when I was reading it.
Right.
Can you break it down for someone who's not a philosopher or a mystic?
Sure. Think of it like this. Involution is the process of the AL, like wrapping itself up in its creation, becoming part of the material world, almost like an artist getting lost in their artwork. And then evolution is the process of unfolding of the universe and everything in it striving to return to its source, to the AL.
So involution is like the outward breath of creation.
Yeah.
And evolution is the inward breath, the return to the source. I'm picturing it like this cosmic expansion and contraction, almost like a heartbeat pulsing through the whole universe.
That's a great way to imagine it. And what's fascinating is that both involution and evolution, they're happening within the mind of the AL.
So it's not just that the universe is expanding and contracting physically, but mentally too, within the consciousness of the AL.
Exactly. And this process, this grand cycle of involution and evolution, it's seen as this continuous unfolding of the divine plan. It's the AL experiencing itself through creation.
That makes me think about, like, the purpose of life,
Uh-huh.
our role in all of this.
Yeah.
If we're part of this huge unfolding, does that mean like each of us has a specific purpose, a reason for being here? Does the Kybalion say anything about that?
Well, it doesn't give us a specific path or purpose for every person. Okay. But it does suggest that our ultimate goal is to evolve, to move toward greater understanding and awareness, to become more like the AL.
So it's more about the journey than the destination. We're always trying to expand our consciousness and align ourselves with these universal principles.
That's a great way to put it. And this process of evolution, of spiritual growth, it's driven by our desire to reconnect with the source, with the AL.
Which makes sense if we're all essentially sparks of that divine consciousness, like the Kybalion says. But the AL, it's still a pretty abstract concept.
Right.
Is there anything more we can say about what it is, or is it just beyond our understanding?
The Kybalion acknowledges that trying to truly understand the AL, it's just beyond what our limited minds can do. It's like trying to explain how water tastes to someone who's never had a drink.
Right.
Words can't really capture that experience.
But the book doesn't leave us totally clueless, does it?
Yeah.
It seemed to give us some hints about how to approach this whole mystery.
Oh, it definitely encourages us to use both our reason and our intuition.
Okay.
To combine our logical minds with our inner knowing to try and understand the L and how it relates to the universe. It also invites us to embrace this divine paradox, recognizing that the universe is both real and not real. It feels real because we experience it, but ultimately it exists within the infinite mind of the AL.
That's a lot to wrap our heads around. But I think the important thing here isn't getting bogged down in these philosophical debates.
Right.
It's more about focusing on how we can use these principles in our own lives.
Absolutely. The Kybalion, it's not just some theoretical book. It's meant to be a practical guide to help us understand and master the mental forces that shape our reality.
So let's get practical then. We've talked about how these principles work on this huge cosmic level. But how can we use them to deal with the everyday challenges of life? Can we actually use mentalism, correspondence, vibration, and all the rest to improve our relationships, achieve our goals, and find more peace and happiness?
Well, that's where the real power of the Kybalion comes in, and that's what we're going to explore next.
You know, as we've been going through all these principles from the Kybalion, the one that keeps sticking with me is mentalism, that whole idea that the universe is basically mental creation. It's kind of exciting, but also a little bit, intimidating.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most profound and potentially life-changing ideas in Hermetic philosophy. If we really get that concept that everything we experience comes from the mind of the AL, it makes you think about the power of your own thoughts in a whole new way.
Because if the AL can create these huge universes with just its thoughts, does that mean we have a similar power to create, even if it's on a much smaller scale? Are we all these little creators shaping our reality with every single thought we have?
That's what it seems to be suggesting, and it's an idea that you find in lots of spiritual and philosophical traditions. The Kybalion emphasizes that each of us is like a tiny reflection of the AL, mirroring the same principles and having a spark of that same creative power.
But if that's true, why do we often feel so helpless to change our situation? If we're these powerful creators, why do we get trapped in these patterns of negativity, feeling limited, and just unhappy?
That's a really good question, and the Kybalion does offer some explanations. It suggests that most people just aren't aware of their true mental nature. They get caught up in their thoughts and emotions instead of recognizing that they are the thinker, the one observing those thoughts and emotions.
It's like we're stuck in a dream, reacting to all the images and things happening in our minds, but not realizing that we're the dreamer, the one creating those images and scenarios. We've forgotten that we're the ones holding the pen, so to speak.
Exactly. And that's where these 7 principles come in. They're not just abstract ideas. They're like tools to help us wake up from that dream, to become conscious creators of our own reality.
So how do we actually start using these tools? How do we take mentalism, correspondence, vibration, and all the rest, and use them in a practical way to make our lives better?
Well, let's look at polarity, for example. We talked about how it suggests we can change negative emotions into positive ones by shifting our vibration on the spectrum. But how do we actually do that in real life? The Kybalion doesn't give us a step-by-step guide, but it does hint at some techniques. One way is to use the power of affirmations and visualizations.
Okay, so if I'm feeling anxious or scared, I could consciously choose to focus on thoughts and pictures that make me feel calm and brave.
Exactly. You're using your mind to change your emotional state, to move away from fear and towards courage. It's like exercising your mental muscles to redirect your energy.
That makes sense. What about vibration? How can we use that principle in a practical way?
Remember, vibration says that everything has a frequency. If you want to attract certain things into your life, whether it's a new job, a loving relationship, or better health, you can try to consciously align your vibration with the frequency of those things.
So if I want to bring more abundance into my life, I might focus on cultivating feelings of gratitude, generosity, and being prosperous.
Exactly. By changing your thoughts and feelings in that direction, you're basically tuning your vibrational radio dial to the frequency of abundance.
This is starting to feel really empowering. It's like we have way more control over our lives than we think. But, what about cause and effect? How do we apply that principle without getting freaked out by the idea that every little thought and action could have these crazy consequences we don't even see coming?
It's not about getting paralyzed by fear, but rather becoming more aware and intentional. Cause and effect reminds us that we're always planting seeds with our thoughts, words, and actions. So, if we want to create a more positive and fulfilling life, we need to plant the kinds of seeds that will grow into the experiences we want.
So instead of dwelling on those negative thoughts and fears, we can choose to focus on thoughts of love, kindness, and possibilities, and that will then create these ripples of positivity going outward.
Exactly. It's all about taking responsibility for the energy we're sending out into the world. And that brings us right back to mentalism, the core principle. If we truly grasp that the universe is mental, then our thoughts are more than just fleeting things, they're forces that shape our reality.
That's a huge responsibility, but also a pretty amazing opportunity, right? We have the power to choose our thoughts, and by doing that, we're choosing the direction of our lives.
The Kybalion encourages us to become the masters of our minds, not the other way around. And mastering our minds means understanding these 7 principles and learning how to use them on purpose.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step for someone who wants to really dig into these teachings and start using them?
The Kybalion is one of those books that gets better every time you read it. It's not something you just read once and then put on a shelf. The real work starts when you begin experimenting with these principles in your own life. See how they show up in your relationships, your job, even your inner world.
It's almost like a science experiment,
Yeah.
testing the principles, watching what happens, and refining what we understand along the way.
And remember, this is a journey, not a finish line. There's always more to learn and explore. The Kybalion provides the framework, the mental tools, but it's up to each of us to take those tools and build the life we want.
This deep dive into the Kybalion has been seriously mind-blowing. We've explored ancient wisdom, cosmic principles, and the hidden potential of the human mind. And I think the biggest thing we've learned is this. We're not just watching a predetermined reality unfold. We're actively involved. We're co-creators of our own experience.
And by understanding how the universe works, by aligning our thoughts and actions with those principles, we can tap into a power that most people only dream about. We can become the architects of our own destiny.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to grab a copy of the Kybalion and start your own journey of discovery. Explore these 7 principles, try them out, and see how they can change your life. Who knows? Maybe you'll even uncover some hidden mental powers along the way. Until next time, keep your minds open and your vibrations high.